More earnings reports coming in as Ceplac Petroleum Development Company reports loss before tax of $57.5 million, blames shutdown of Focado's facilities in Nigeria. Africa's biggest mobile phone operator, MTN, set to list on the Nigerian Stock Exchange in 2017. Plus, Algeria to launch a new economic growth model for the next 4 years. Thank you for joining us. This is Business Incorporated coming to you live from Lagos. I'm Chimize Obi Iwago. Well, we'll begin with those earnings reports. Ceplac Petroleum Development Company has posted loss before taxation of $57.5 million in the second quarter ended June 30. This is against the profit of $41.3 million the company made a year ago. The company's revenue also went down to $143.1 million against $247.6 million a year ago. Ceplac attributes the losses to the shutdown of the Nigerian Focado's oil export facilities since February this year. And miner Anglo American has cut its net debt to $11.5 billion by the end of June from $12.9 billion at the end of December. And that is what it has said this Thursday. The miner has previously said it is seeking to sell $3 billion to $4 billion of assets in 2016, including its iron ore, coal and nickel units. So far, it has agreed to asset sale worth $1.5 billion. Now, the chief executive officer of the company said in an interim results statement that the decisive actions were taken to strengthen the balance sheet and put the company well on track to achieve its net debt target of less than $10 billion at the end of 2016. India's largest telecom network operator, Bharti Airtel Limited, has reported a 30.8% fall in first quarter net profit, blaming an adverse foreign exchange impact in Nigeria, although it beat analyst estimates. Consolidated net profit fell to 14.62 billion rupees in the quarter ended June 30 from 21.13 billion rupees last year. Analysts on average had expected a net profit of 11.59 billion rupees. Bharti Airtel, headed by Indian billionaire Sunil Mittal, said total revenue rose 7.9% from a year earlier to a record 255.47 billion rupees, helped by new customers signing up for the company's 3G and 4G data services. Facebook has posted another exceptional quarter of growth, with profit up 186% from this time last year. Facebook earned $2 billion in the period from April to June, up from $790 million in 2015. Analysts had anticipated revenue of $5.8 billion, but the company managed to beat even those high expectations, bringing in $6.4 billion in revenue. And to the global markets now, we'll begin with Asia, as shares in Japan have fallen, with investors remaining cautious as the country's central bank meets to discuss monetary policy. The benchmark Nikkei 225 index closed down 1.13%. In Australia, the benchmark ASX 200 share index closed up 0.31%. China's benchmark Shanghai Composite Index ended flat at 2,994.32. In Hong Kong, the Hang Seng Index finished the day 44.65 points lower. In South Korea, the Kospi closed down 0.2%. And let's move to Europe now and see how the markets are looking ahead. The Bank of Japan's decisions due on Friday, and of course, how Fed's Wednesday's decisions are being digested. Let's talk to DWTV Channels TV financial correspondent there at Frankfurt Stock Exchange, Janelle Dumelon. Hello, Janelle. Good to have you on the program. Now, the Federal Reserve chose to keep interest rates unchanged on Wednesday. How is the market digesting the Fed's decision and, of course, looking ahead, BOJ's decision due tomorrow, Friday?
Yes, exactly. The Fed's dovish stance was widely expected to be the way that it was. Nobody was really surprised by this. Everybody expected the Fed to hang fire, but at the same time be sufficiently upbeat about U.S. economic data as to warrant a rate hike perhaps later this year. Now, that being said, of course, all eyes are now on the Bank of Japan and its policy meeting tomorrow. Everyone wants to see what they're going to do, and investors are definitely hoping for a fresh round of stimulus. Now, amid all of this news, of course, the markets have been decidedly mixed all over the world. You mentioned that Asian markets saw some losses. European markets have been very mixed indeed, and we're waiting to see how the U.S. market will absorb all this news.
Now, more corporate results are coming in. LVMH, Telecom Italia, Santander, and others. Could you talk us through these companies' moving corporate results?
Yes, exactly. We are simply awash in numbers this week. Financial results season is definitely here. You mentioned LVMH. It's incidentally been a very good quarter for luxury goods makers. It's not the only one that saw some success. Dior actually did very well. But I think it's also been a very interesting week for European banks. As we know, we're getting their numbers as well, and they've been operating in a very sort of difficult marketing environment with tougher banking regulation and a lot of volatility. Yesterday, we saw Deutsche Bank and Santander see the revenues decline steeply. But today, for example, we saw France's biggest bank, the BNP Paribas. They were saved from a similar fate by selling their credit card shares in Visa. So there, as you can see, that saved their bottom line, and it hasn't all been the same for European banks this week.
And of course, the job data coming in shows that Germany unemployment went up slightly in July, although unemployment rate remains at low levels not seen since the early 1990s. What does that tell about the German economy? And of course, how is it affecting the DAX? Looking behind you there, I can see the DAX tilting downwards.
Yes, the DAX is tilting downwards, but I think that has less to do with the German unemployment figures. German unemployment figures have gone up slightly in July, as you've mentioned, but this is mostly end up on the job market. If you were to adjust for those effects, you would see that there are actually 7,000 fewer people looking for jobs than there were before, and that beats out analysts' estimate of 4,000. So yes, as you mentioned, German unemployment is still at a record low of 6.1%, and that does have something to do with Germany's very strong underlying economic fundamentals.
Right, thank you very much for those update, Janelle. Well, that was Janelle Dumalong, DWTV Channels TV financial correspondent there, reporting from Frankfurt Stock Exchange. We move on now. In the U.S., the Federal Reserve of the United States on Wednesday kept federal funds rate unchanged, reiterating that it continues to closely monitor inflation indicators and global economic and financial developments. Not surprisingly, the Fed kept its target range for the federal funds rate at 0.25% to 0.5%, and the rate hasn't been changed since last December. The Fed officials gave more upbeat description of the economy. Total non-farm payroll employment increased by 287,000 in June, pointing to a healthy labor market despite the slowdown in April and May. Meanwhile, household spending have grown strongly, yet enterprise fixed assets investment remains weak. And in the UK, the economy grew by 0.6% in the 3 months to the end of June, as economic growth accelerated in the run-up to the vote to leave the EU. The Office for National Statistics said second quarter gross domestic product grew faster than expected, up from 0.4% growth in the previous quarter. However, by far, the strongest growth was in April, followed by a sharp easing off in May and June. On a yearly basis, the economy grew by a healthy 2.2%. The pickup in economic activity was boosted by the biggest upturn in industrial output since 1999, particularly from car factories and pharmaceutical firms. We'll take a quick break now. When we return, MTN to list on the Nigerian Stock Exchange. Details in a moment.